You know what's worse than a bad TV show? A great TV show that doesn't know how to end. Because when you spend years watching these characters, building up storylines, and getting invested in everything that's happening, you expect the ending to actually feel worth it. But sometimes it feels like the writers looked at the clock and said, alright, we gotta wrap this up. And today we're gonna be talking about 3 of those shows. So first off, we got Cobra Kai. It's probably one of the weirdest examples because the show had so much going on by the end. You had Johnny, Daniel, Miguel, Robbie, Sam, Tori, Kreese, and Silver. Now, honestly, I would say that this is kind of an outlier, and I felt like this finale was actually pretty good compared to the other ones that we're going to get into. But I thought the ending was pretty good. I just feel that there were a lot going on, but I feel like it was honestly one of the better ones. Now, moving on to Stranger Things, I feel like this is one that's a little different. Stranger Things had one of the biggest finales, and honestly, it set up impossible expectations for itself. After all, the show started as a simple story about a group of kids in Hawkins, and obviously Will going missing. But then it becomes this massive supernatural war involving the Upside Down, Vecna 11, and basically the fate of the entire town. So by the time we reach the finale, right, the final season, it's like there was so much to wrap up, and it's like you cannot do this many plot lines and hit all these beats within the finale. It wasn't completely horrible, but most of the season was kind of and then the finale really had fans really divided, especially with the ending. And honestly, with all these characters, it does create a lot of pacing issues. And yeah, they had to jump between them pretty fast. But instead, I feel like they handled it within like a few minutes. It wasn't really handled very well. Now, you don't have to end the main story. You just need to give every important character an ending that feels right, that feels deserved. And they didn't really do that, but I still feel like Stranger Things gave us a lot of great moments. And the earlier scenes are still like really good, even like upon a rewatch. Now, the last show I'm going to talk about is Umbrella Academy. The show is probably not as popular, but I do think the show still had a bad ending. I think it's worth talking about. It had spent multiple seasons introducing characters, mysteries, and just like Stranger Things and maybe Game of Thrones, if I will mention that. The season really did not wrap everything up well. So instead of letting the story naturally develop, the final season just moved extremely quickly. Characters had to deal with major problems, huge revelations happened. And there are many storylines that I feel like were going to be really important, but obviously they just lead to nowhere, which is kind of also like Stranger Things. But yeah, so honestly, in conclusion, I would say most of these shows just suffer from needing more time. I think focus on the main characters. You know, introducing a bunch of side characters in the last season is always going to create issues. And I think that's something really common in these shows. Just pretty much just character bloat, literally. The cast is just way too large. And I think killing off some characters is also necessary. But yeah.